Hi, everyone. Welcome to Informed Dissent, a news podcast that brings you dispatches from the gender culture war. I am Ben Appel, the author of Cis White Gay, The Making of a Gender Heretic, which will be available on November 4th. And I'm here with my co-hosts, Gender Clinic and whistleblower and co-executive director of LGBT Courage Coalition, Jamie Reed, the disenchanted transsexual Corey Cohn, and the always insightful writer and researcher Eliza Mondegreen. Lisa is out today. First, before we get to today's topic, just going to go over a few headlines. A reminder that if you would like a full kind of breakdown news roundup for paid subscribers, we do a weekly newsletter. But here's about five, I guess. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services is investigating hospitals, select hospitals that offer gender-affirming care to minors. The hospitals were not specified, but a letter was sent to them from Dr. Oz, who is the administrator there, requesting reports on both finances and policies and procedures within 30 days. Another is there was a study, trans and gender diverse patients more likely to be diagnosed with DCIS, which is a form of breast cancer, apparently. Which this article is so interesting because oh, they're trans. It seems like they're saying trans, it looks like they're saying trans identified males are more likely to be diagnosed with breast cancer at a younger age than cisgender women, right? Well, then I just kind of looked up like, well, doesn't estrogen kind of lead to a higher rate of cancer in males when they take estrogen? And the answer is yes. So, but the conclusion of the article was like trans women need better care, like not like, oh, maybe they're taking hormones that, aren't good for them. Um, Besides the fact that women's healthcare is still lacking. So, that's just always entertaining stuff. Kansas trans kids and their parents have filed a lawsuit challenging Kansas's ban on gender affirming care. One trans identified female, one trans identified male. The Justice Department is investigating California over trans athlete policies. After threats from Trump, the California Interscholastic Federation changed their rules. I don't know if you guys knew about this, but New York Times was reporting, AT reported, but the AP reported. The New York Times reported that the sports governing body on Wednesday announced that it was making additional changes to the competition by allowing an additional female athlete, to advance from the preliminary round to the final in the girls' high jump, triple jump, or long jump, quote, if necessary. The Federation also indicated that medals will be awarded to the top nine, quote, biological female competitors, and that the transgender girl would get a duplicate medal if she's a top finisher. It was unclear whether the transgender competitor would be able to score team points or stand on the podium. I think it's going down this weekend in California. I think it's gonna be a kind of a, I don't know if it's a watershed moment, but it's caught so much attention because it's, everything that Gavin Newsom has said and all of this dialogue about this. Obviously, the Trump administration putting so much pressure, but the dialogue, the conversation is changing. Democratic Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego just came out and said that the concerns about trans athletes in sports are legitimate. He qualified his language, but he did say that. So I think that this weekend is going to be a big, I don't know, it's going to be maybe a turning point in this saga. But what's interesting is that they make these changes. It's like we're not going to disallow males from playing with women, but we're going to make it so that they get duplicate medals, or we allow more girls. It's just conceding that males
It's
have this
really,
disadvantage. I mean, they have an advantage, and that there is a difference, and that we need to fix this and deal with it. So it's fascinating. Anyway, over to Jamie.
yeah,
Jamie,
it's like a really obvious, like playing along. And it's like, no, 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 no. Like the kind of point was to pretend that you're not pretending. This is like, no, 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 like wink, wink, they're girls, but
yeah,
it's bizarre. It's a really bizarre place to land.
Special
absolutely,
girls.
Special, more, yeah,
very special.
extra special.
Okay, so I wanted to present to our hosts today a couple questions or comments from our listeners. I will let everybody know I did not let Ben, Sarah, or Corey know in advance which questions or comments I pulled, so they're kind of going at this totally cold. And then after we do this, there were two other pieces this week that we were going to kind of talk through. I think the biggest one dropped yesterday from Politico. An opinion piece title was "The Debate Over Transgender Rights is a Liability for Democrats. Here's How to Neutralize That." So before we get to that piece, I'm going to do this order. So I'm going to go Eliza, Corey, Eliza, Ben, and just read some comments and just see if you want to give us a little bit more insight or comment. So, Eliza, this one came from May 3rd, and the listener's handle is El Diablo.
Yeah.
Okay. So they write,
Anna,
Eliza.
aren't you Mexican?
Shh. Yes, I that's irrelevant. That doesn't mean that I speak Spanish in any good sense of the word. So Eliza, around the 46-minute mark, they write, you were talking about parents trying uh, to not want to sterilize kids as a type of enforced pronatalism. They write that they were watching an interview with Louise Perry recently where she talked about the decline in birth rates across the Western world, and it struck me that practically speaking, that the modern left has become very anti-natal. Like it's gone from believing that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare to believing that it should be safe, legal, common, and celebrated. Fear of climate change has also caused many to refuse to have children as a way of sparing them from a future of suffering. So it really shouldn't be a surprise at this point that the left-wing people in general aren't really going to care about whether GAC sterilizes kids because they oppose any suggestion that kids might be an important part of a fulfilling life for many, if not most people. I wonder how much of the left's anti-natalism is a knee-jerk response to to the right's pro-natalism. I thought that this was a really intriguing comment, and I wondered if this was something. Have you seen this in any of your research? Are the parents really, the kids don't care about their future fertility, the parents don't either?
Yeah. Um, so I do think that part of it is, yeah, that knee-jerk response to, conservative or Republican pronatalism. And there's also, I mean, a very common like profile of a young person in the online communities is somebody who has like they're kind of, we might say they're like an across the board doomer, right? Like, so it's a transgenocide and there's, a climate apocalypse. And so all of these different ways of basically discounting the future. So like, why would it matter? Like, what would it even mean to regret it in the future? Or if you live a shorter life, like that's going to happen anyway. I think that disappearance of the future as a broader problem, particularly within like left progressive political circles, is a big part of the trans thing and the kind of indifference around some pretty serious sterilizing and life shortening effects. And also, I noticed I was going to do this anyway, but my name is different on here.
Oh gosh, you just came out.
No, I mean, like it's been a long, like thousands of people know my real name. So, yeah, I'm Sarah. We're just probably going to do that from now on.
Hi, Sarah.
I'm so excited for you.
It's amazing.
It's been
No,
so long.
I got really stuck with the you can use my dead name, but I got really kind of stuck with the pen name because it wasn't. I kind of created it after thinking about it for about 10 seconds in 2019, and then it kind of was the only thing that anybody knew.
So we're retiring that. 6 years
Kind
ish.
of, yeah, we're gonna kind of phase it out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Big moment.
if we slip up and we use your dead name once in a
No,
while,
I won't talk to you anymore.
we will try to do better.
Okay.
We'll pretend like it didn't happen so that we don't embarrass you by drawing attention to it.
Okay.
You can send the bread back and you can ask for your Disney.
Mm. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this next reader's comment or listener's comment kind of follows in the same concept of the disappearance of the future. So this one was for Corey. Corey, this is from Ruth. Corey, I think your point that there has been no meaning making for the current cohort of young people is spot on. As a Gen Xer, I'm left contemplating what this task used to look like for me in the 1980s. And I wondered if there were some ways you can share with us. Did you grow up with meaning making? Was there something that we used to have as young people that has disappeared that we could bring back? And then Ruth closed it with thank you all for another excellent episode. So this concept of meaning making.
That's pretty interesting. So I'm a Gen Xer, so I grew up in the 1980s. And I would say that one of the major things that characterized the experience of being a young American at that time is that we were on the cusp of major technological change. The internet hadn't been created yet, but home computers were starting to appear. There was tremendous amounts of, worldwide, there was tremendous amounts of poverty. We weren't quite at this blended sort of culture yet where Hollywood is making things for international audiences instead of American audiences. So there's still this real sense of American identity. There's an idea of what it meant to be an American. We hadn't had this diffusion of 400 different channels on cable. So there was a concentration of things that people were watching. Like you grew up watching The Cosby Show. You grew up watching Family Ties. Even a little bit younger people grew up watching Nickelodeon. But there was a lot more concentration and group identity. And the types of things that you would see, that I would see growing up would be, do you remember like Farm Aid and Hands Across America? And that there were all these types of very broad social appeals to help other people, right? Like we can save starving children in Africa. Maybe all of us have seen those commercials at one point or another, or maybe only I have, I don't know. But this was very much a characteristic of Americans. They have an identity, and America is a shining beacon for the world, and we can help other people. We can help lift other people out of poverty. We can help address starvation across the globe. Like the idea that America had something very valuable to offer and bring to other people so that we could bring people up to our expectations and our standards, I think was really a characteristic of my upbringing. And I suspect that that's not the case anymore.
Does that cycle back into the disappearance of the future and the doomsday? So what's the point of even trying if it's all for naught?
Yeah, so if the things that I just mentioned were characteristic of my youth, what I see as being characteristic of the millennial and Gen Z generation is global warming, the destruction of the climate and various environments, ocean levels rising, global pandemics and global famine instead of things getting better. Like all of the messaging is how terrible humans are, colonialism, right? So even though the momentum from my youth carried China out of poverty, carried India out of poverty, carried Africa out of poverty and starvation, that the standards of living have increased tremendously over the last 30 years. all of the messaging is how terrible humanity is for the world. So we've sort of flipped from this idea that we can help people and save people and improve people's lives to everything is bad and the planet hates us, and the best thing that we can do is to stop existing.
Thank you for that. Eliza, I'm going to go back to you. A little bit of a lighter note. The handle is ULLR. Love you all so much for this episode. It felt therapeutic, but if you will allow some notes. The listener has met someone who goes by Goblin, and it's an affectionate term for young women mostly who feel messy relationship-wise and seems more used by the non-binary kids. Eliza, is Goblin Core one of the aesthetics popular on Tumblr and IG? And before you answer, I'll admit the only core I know of is cottagecore. So are there more cores beyond cottagecore and now Goblin Core? And is it really on Tumblr and IG?
Yeah, so if you really want to, if you're procrastinating on something and you also just want to like set a lot of brain cells on fire, you can go to this thing. It's either called Style Wiki or Aesthetic Wiki, and you will find out all of the cores: Barbie core, ballet core, goblin core, cottage core. Anyway, we will put a link in. I'm not going to say it's going to make your life a lot better, but so when I looked up goblin core on this and found this wiki, like, yeah, they do dress a lot like that. And the way that I would describe it for the people who are not pulling up the website right now is like what is on the Pinterest board of this person is like garden gnomes, homelessness, being colorblind.
Wait. Garden gnomes, homelessness, and being colorblind.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie and say that I never dressed like this around the house, but like it's like the things that you should maybe just wear around the house.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then there was a second part to this.
Oh, okay.
Which you might not know about this section of the world, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So, voice training, is it a big part of the fetish, sissy, CDTW dominatrix world? And to see it mentioned so casually in an academic discussion is wildly inappropriate. Ben, you might know some more about this too. So, can you talk about voice training as being part of whatever the fetish, sissy, what is CDT?
It's got to be cross-dressing trans
Woman.
women. Oh, women.
Okay.
Oh, is it TV or TW?
TW.
Okay, cross-dressing trans women. Obviously, we're all a little bit out of our depth here. I know that like there have long been voice training services for transsexual males. I'm not aware of it being a big part of the fetish.
Okay.
But I'm
Ben,
not.
have you ever seen any of the voice part or Corey part of the fetish part?
I mean, I guess what isn't it all kind of part of the fetish for a specific type of cross-dresser and trans-identified person where, you know, any kind of trait that mimics that of a typical female is arousing or moves towards arousing or potentially arousing, right?
Okay, so then I'm going to follow up for Ben and Sarah.
Okay.
Do you feel like these topics being brought over into academic discussion appropriate, wildly inappropriate? Is this where we've seen some of like the Andrea Chu, this crossover into academia? Is this a legitimate area of study?
I'm sorry, and where was this discussion?
Yeah, I'm
Um,
not exactly sure what the academic, like, yeah, if you
so
could.
voice training, I I don't exactly remember what we were talking about in the initial episode, but I think that we were talking about some of this academic crossover. It might have even been um, who wrote the book, Gil Peterson.
Jules
Was there
did.
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah.
so do these things belong in academic discussion? Is this
Oh,
part of,
I see what you're
yeah,
saying. What do you think, Eliza? I'm sorry, Sarah.
Um, I, I mean, okay, if you think you see it, I'm not sure why it wouldn't be part of an academic discussion as long as it's not like they're women because they have voice train. I don't know. I'm not sure I totally get it.
I think when we're talking about like the academic setting, I mean, this is just like the tip of the iceberg. Like there are entire departments for queer studies and for these kind of discussions. I mean, that conversation with Jules Gill Peterson and Grace Lavery and all of that, that was at Stanford's gender, like there's a gender center, like an whatever it is. So these are so institutionalized. But in terms of, I guess the question is about appropriateness. I mean, I think it all leads to nothing. I think that it's all just postmodern crap. Um, you know, uh, could it have a purpose in like creative discussions? Perhaps, but it doesn't add any new knowledge. It's just all an attempt to deconstruct existing knowledge and kind of undermine it to, queer things, blur boundaries, make the deviant normal or acceptable, make you know what I mean? I mean, it's interesting because in the newsletter this week, I was looking up, if I look up these headlines, and UC Irvine is hosting a Love My Fursona, or actually hosted yesterday. Love My Fursona, imagining and embodying trans feelings through furry art and performance. A research talk and Q&A with Professor Hazel Ali Zaman Gonzalez. And it's in Humanities Gateway 1002. This is the event description. What is furry? What is a fursona? Is furry queer? I love this one. What does the fursona do for queer and trans people of color? Dr. Hazel Ali Zaman Gonzalez will be sharing insights into these questions and more through her ongoing research into furry using ethnographic and critical methods. And then it's hosted with support from the Queer Approaches to Media Research Cluster. So that's one example of, there's a Queer Approaches to Media Research Cluster at UC Irvine. So yeah, no, it's all stupid and it's mental masturbation, you know? Um, I don't know.
thank you, Ben. Perfect. Okay, Ben, my comment slash question that was for you from Intentionally Uncertain. Ben mentions that Megyn Kelly argued that it would be better for journalists to be upfront about their bias and report from their perspective. Lisa argues for the importance of both being open about the bias, but also trying to look clearly even at evidence that doesn't fit in the journalist's worldview. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that conflict? Do you think it would be better, do you kind of follow still what Megan was arguing for? And if so, like how? How do journalists be upfront about their bias and perspective?
What
Should it be their byline? Should it be, yeah.
Well, I think with like a Venn diagram of what Lisa was saying and what Megan was saying, there's like a big overlap, So, you know, uh, I don't necessarily think Megan Kelly was saying that I don't think journalists, when they're biased, should even consider divergent viewpoints. But it was more about stressing just being completely open and honest about their bias rather than inserting it in kind of clandestinely and in a kind of propagandistic way that we see a lot of outlets do, whether they're using euphemisms or whether they're kind of just inserting these subtle little cues that are adding an agenda, and showing their agenda, revealing their agenda, or at least their editors or publishers' agenda. But yeah, it's a complicated issue. I definitely agree with Lisa, with what Lisa was saying in terms of considering divergent viewpoints. But I just appreciated that conversation because, with the way that the media landscape is now, I think that, well, I don't know. I think that there obviously needs to be both of them, but how objective and unbiased is one really? I mean, do you guys read truly unbiased reporting these days? Like, are there any, do you see it around? I mean, or can you kind of always notice when you're reading some coverage a slant? I feel like I can always sense at least a little bit of a slant.
Oh, Tony.
Oh, I think that's a brilliant segue, honestly, into the Politico piece.
Okay.
No, like seriously,
Yeah.
because part of the slant that was so clear for me in that was just the way that the author was talking about Republicans. Like there is so much of there's so two-party, we're on either side and the other side is evil and mean and like was so clear in that slant. Um, but I don't know that there's any truly unbiased journalism left, but I don't know if there ever was any.
Right.
Was there really ever?
Well, I mean, I think even maybe Megan brought this up, or maybe you brought this up. I can't remember what this was, but she was talking about like the Federalist and just reporting back in 200 years ago, 250 years ago. There was no, you know, this is how I feel. This is what I think. There was, I mean, I guess there was a lot of opinion, and they're also forming a nation, so there was a lot to argue about. But, um, you know,
There's no what?
there was, what did I say? What did I just say? I don't even know.
You made it sound like there was no opinionated journalism.
I'm sorry. There was opinionated journalism. There was not much, there was objective journalism, but so much of it was infused with passion and with an opinion.
Yeah.
So I think she brought that example up in this dialogue that's actually where a lot of, this, journalistic stuff began in the States. And it was a big part of reporting and discourse about news and politics at the time. And then there's this huge effort to, keep everything really objective. But like, it's interesting because a few years ago, I was accepted into a journalism MFA, I'm not a journalism graduate program. It didn't end up going, but one of the required readings before the semester was supposed to start was by a trans writer, and it was called or about eliminating objective, like, you know, uh, focusing on subjective reporting and, eliminating objective reporting. So I don't know. It's just strange. There's just a lot of, and that's kind of why I didn't go to that program.
Okay, so before we really dive into the Politico piece, I will just pick on my own self and say that there were three comments that I saw about me. One of them is essentially that I might be quickly disowned if I do not watch the movie Psycho, and there was some shock that I have never seen it.
I've never seen it either.
Okay, so you shouldn't have admitted that because they're going to come after you and say that You cannot speak about culture if you've never seen the movie Psycho. Okay. The other thing is that it has now become a running joke in my household based on some comments that people now say that clearly I must have been homeschooled. It's becoming a joke in the comments section that Jamie seems to. There are reasons why I come across as seeming homeschooled. And then Julia Mason did point out, Jamie, we never heard the story about the protesters being confused by your anarchist tattoos. You were going to say that you came from a coffee shop and diverged into a trans woman who maybe transitioned from trauma, and then you talked about the movie Psycho. Pretty epic diversion. Quickly, yes, there were some young protesters who I confuse very much. One of them did say, I thought you are an anarchist, and how could you be an anarchist and stand behind these police officers who are protecting the glass house, the restaurant that we were in? And one of the responses that I had in this dialogue with this young person was, I asked her, what do you know of anarchism? And do you know that there are different kinds of anarchists? And she said, well, what kind are you? And I said, well, I was a primitivist green anarchist. And just so you know, that means there are no synthetic hormones. They don't exist if we are in a green anarchist environment because we're not synthesizing any hormones. We're really not performing surgery either. So,
bad news if you're diabetic, though.
I don't want to say what we used to do to diabetics. We used to put them in closets and not feed them often. They would
the anarchists, the green anarchist primitivists.
No, that's not what the anarchists did to diabetics. That's what the medical establishment
I know.
did to diabetics before we had insulin.
That's what you guys wanted to go back to.
Yeah, I was a primitivist anarchist, so definitely pre-industrialized society, probably pre-agriculture as well. But the poor kid had no response when I said there would be no synthetic hormones in my version of the world. So there's that. Okay, who wants to give an introduction onto the Politico article? Who's read it? Go, Corey.
Wait, you're just looking for hands of who's read it.
No, you want to?
Who's also looking for volunteers?
You want to talk about it? Who wrote it?
Well, this is an opinion piece, not a journalist news piece. So I guess that's important to level set here. The debate over transgender rights is a liability for Democrats. Here's how to neutralize it. And this is by Jonathan Cowan, who is the co-founder and president of Third Way, a center-left think tank and advocacy group. And Mr. Cowan's argument in this piece is that the position that Democrat leaders, I would say, are taking on transgender issues. By the way, am I locked up or is Jamie locked up?
Locked up? What do you mean?
Okay, your video is locked up, but let me continue here. So I just wanted to make sure that I was, still connected. The argument that Mr. Cowan is making is that the position that Democratic leaders are taking on transgender issues are by and large unpopular even with the Democratic base. And that although Republicans are articulating positions that have more broad support, Democratic leaders ought to try to find their way towards a more middle position on these issues. And he goes through a number of transgender related topics, trying to establish what that middle ground is that he believes that Democratic leaders ought to adopt. Is that a fair description?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, what's interesting is that he says, while there's no moral equivalency between these two sides, the demonization by the right is much worse. Both extremes are wrong and are adding far more heat than light to this evolving and complex national conversation. But it's interesting, he's talking about like what the Democrats need to do. And this is the left is what has screwed the Democrats. It's not, I mean, the right's uh, invective, of course, can be whatever, crass or whatever. Just some people can see it as disrespectful or rude, but
Hateful, vital.
hateful, right? But it's a reaction to what the left how the left behaves. And so, for him to be like the demonization by the right is so much worse, it's like, but this is a left-wing problem because you're talking about the Democrats and you're talking about the left and you're talking about the authoritarianism of the left and their capture of that party. So that to me is the conversation that you need to have. The rights, this is just a reaction. The right is reacting to how you're behaving. What do you think?
I think at this author's core, so I think in Jonathan, at his core, he actually believes that the left Democrat position is the correct one, but that the electorate has not come to that realization yet, and that the Democrats need to just slow down
Mhm.
until they get there. And and I take all of that from this sentence here where he says, second, for Democrats to regain the support of centrist voters who deliver electoral victories, they must meet Americans where they are today, not where advocates might wish them to be or where society might be headed in the future. This man still believes that where society is headed and should be headed is the full embrace of trans.
But is that what he's saying? Because he's saying where they must meet Americans where they are today, not where advocates might wish them to be. So that's advocates. He's putting that on advocates. And then he's
Right.
saying, or where society may be headed in the future. He doesn't say should be headed or should end up. You
Yeah,
know,
but
I mean, it could suggest it, but I'm just saying it. He's not declaring that specifically that this is where I think it should be. I mean, perhaps he does think that. I think, yeah. He goes on to say culture is always upstream of politics and views may shift
Yes.
in the coming decades. So, I think that he's cleverly towing a line there. He's not declaring this is where he thinks it should be, or, that's just my opinion. I think he's stupider than that. I think he's dumb. I think that it's like tell me you don't know about this issue, anything about this issue without telling me you don't know anything about this issue. It's such a milquetoast like, just commentary on something that he's dipping into as if he's gotten all of his messaging from biased media, from like Glad Talking Points HRC infused media that that's his knowledge about it. The most nuanced and the most daring he's gone in this is those horrible New York Times pieces that, Glad and whoever else is saying are, killing trans people. Or, when Gavin Newsom finally says, something about sports and then other Democrats start to say it. I think that he's just someone that has a position of authority because he's part of this center left think tank, but he knows zilch about the complexity of this issue.
yeah, he's the latest entrant in the there's a reasonable middle ground, and I alone, a newcomer, have found it, and it was kind of heartbreaking. Um, but basically he's on the like, okay, he still thinks it's a messaging problem, and it's not a messaging problem. It's a problem.
If I were
It
to
is.
if I were to guess anything about this guy, like if I were to assume anything about him, and again, this is just an assumption, I have no idea. But reading from this, he seems to me like he would be one of those people that in 20 years, when it doesn't progress in that direction, and hopefully, society comes to its senses and males are not dominating females in women's sports, and we're not, giving mastectomies to 14-year-old girls, he's going to be like, I never supported that. That was insane. You know, like that's my reading of this guy. He
Yeah,
goes where the
but
political
he's gonna
winds.
be in good. He's gonna be in good company.
Yeah, but he's just like following. It's so much like where I'm looking at polls, I'm looking at the political winds, I'm looking at the discourse. This to me doesn't say convictions. It says strategy and what other people think and how they should react to what other people think. And this is as safe as I can be. And then, of course, he's like, but I know that people are going to cancel me and I'm going to be so, I know this is going to be upset. It's like, oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Like, you're so brave.
Yeah. Lior Sapir had a really good thread about this on Twitter, which we will share, and just really kind of it shows the way that poor Jonathan here has misconstrued the debate, because he's like, there's no universe in which like the Republicans are worse than the progressives on this, because the Republicans have used some crass language, because like the progressives are actually like supporting like mastectomies for teenage girls and things like that. Like that's just like, there's no competition between like people being assholes and like the medical scandal that's unfolding. And he also talks about the reasonable middle ground that Cowan really tries to carve out on youth gender medicine, where like parents should consent, and Lior points out like, okay, patients, parents, and in many cases clinicians are misinformed, parents are often coerced, and we shouldn't do it anyway even if parents consent. Yeah.
So to me, this strikes then at the heart of the problem of the Democrats right now. And what angers me to no end is the problem that they're having is what I thought they actually used to be good at, which is there's a societal problem. We should do some research and form a committee and come back with with all of the data. I used to think that that's what they were the ones that were good at doing. We should look at the science.
Right, Jamie. After all, it was the Democrats who created the EPA, for example.
Did they not? I don't know the actual history
No,
there.
it was under Nixon.
Oh, okay. See,
Under
Corey's gonna own me on his libertarianism and be like, Jamie, all of your thoughts of the Democratic Party are actually wrong.
I was trying to bait you, but I was bait
I've learned
blocked
enough. I've learned enough to know that your got yous strike at the heart.
Can I read a sentence from this Cowan piece?
Of course.
Please.
All right, I'm pulling it out of the middle of a paragraph here, but preventing transgender Americans from getting, and he links to some of these things, preventing from getting passports that reflect their gender identity, threatening to defund suicide hotlines, kicking them out of the military. All of this is gratuitous and mean, and voters agree. I think it's interesting, and there are many weaknesses in this piece. I could zero in on any of them, but I'm going to zero in on this one, because if this writer, if Cowan had really tried to understand any of these issues, I don't think that you would be able to describe these as gratuitous and mean, and also have like enough understanding or authority to write this, because the passports, right? Gratuitous and mean to among the changes with the passports is to remove the X designation from the passport. X doesn't mean anything. It's a sex marker. And really what X means is I am taking advantage of a chance to opt out of listing my sex on my passport when everyone else needs to list their sex. So that doesn't seem gratuitous or mean. It just seems like removing a special privilege. Defunding a suicide hotline. It's not defunding a suicide hotline. It's and he links to this in his article. It's removing a specialized subservice from a general suicide hotline. So if you are suicidal and you call the 988 number and you say, I'm a gay teenager, they don't forward you to the Trevor Project now. right? So, and then kicking them out of the military, which I'm not sure if we debated that or not, but there are all sorts of rational arguments about how trans-identified service members should be treated. But at minimum, if we care about female service members, male service members should not be treated like female service members. That's not gratuitous or mean either. And I know in the executive order where Trump removed the transgender identified service members, that there was a comment in there saying that you can't really be an American soldier if you're living a lie. Okay, maybe that commentary was gratuitous, probably was, but the debates of whether or not there should be people pretending to be the other sex in active service is certainly something that people on the left and the right can disagree about or have arguments about without it being mean or gratuitous. You can be sincere. So I'm picking on this because I think if Cowan really cared about finding a middle issue on any of these things, he would be able to describe them in a way apart from calling them just gratuitous and mean.
Yes, but I also have a little bit of a deeper dig at this. He's gratuitous and mean, I think, can be an opinion. This is an opinion piece. He's sharing opinion. I still think that opinion pieces should be factual. You can have an opinion on something, but you should also, it should be correct, right? Did Politico actually fact check this? Because 2 paragraphs up from what you just read from is this sentence. Without explicit parental consent, no one should ever receive gender-affirming care, whether that's medication or any other medical intervention beyond mental health support. Then in parentheses, this has the benefit of being both the medical standard of care and legal requirement in every state. It is absolutely not the legal requirement in every state that there is explicit parental consent to receive, quote, gender-affirming care. There are many states where a minor can access, quote, gender-affirming care without parental consent, and in some of them, without even parental knowledge. You can go get hormones without your parents even knowing. And when I read things like this is where I become livid because I literally was just testifying in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a 13-hour hearing because in Maine, a minor can get, quote, gender-affirming care without parental knowledge or consent. So, dear whatever the hell your name is, Jonathan Cowan, and dear Politico, this was not fact-checked. Because you're wrong. Because that is not the legal requirement in every state. And what medical standard of care? What is he talking about? Is he talking about WPATH SOC 8? Because in SOC 8, there are carve-outs that if a parent does not consent and the child they deem by some magical holy crystal ball is worthy of the necessity of this, then they will talk about how you can go outside of that and go outside if you have one parent who doesn't agree and the other. I mean, it's just, that's a simple fact that's wrong. And so you cannot carve out a democratic position when you're essentially, and I hate this word, but gaslighting parents in like a bunch of states because their kid is getting this without even their knowledge or consent.
Jamie, you mentioned before you were like, I always thought this was kind of a leftist thing or of the Democrats to look at the data and say, like, what can we do? How can we do this? And you had me thinking because that's kind of how I always thought about it too. Like, well, we believe in the science, we look at the facts, but it's actually the opposite. Like, if I think it might be the opposite. Conservatives actually are kind of more pragmatic in their approach to addressing societal issues and building an ideal better society for all of us. They look and they keep the facts on the ground. So they look at the reality, the actual disparities between like racial demographics, and they look at the actual disparities, but the reality of the differences between men and women, and how women, there's a possibility that women earning less than men isn't necessarily just because people prefer, there's like different factors in it, like maybe women choose to have children, maybe that there's just a lot of different things. I'm not saying that that's valid. I'm just saying that they look at all of the nuances of what these are, whereas the left and the Democrats use the facts often that are kind of handed to them by special interest groups and that paint over realities and harsh realities, ugly realities, inconvenient truths. And they're built essentially on houses of cards because once you pull out one thing and someone says, "Oh, but that's actually not true," then it's like the whole thing comes tumbling down, not just because that it's built on a false structure, but because people lose faith in it when they think, well, what else are you lying to me about? If this fact, this basic thing is not even true or factual, then what else is it? But I think that it's part of a larger project of, I wrote about this in my book, but it's like this the difference between like critical theory and critical social theory and like traditional theory. Whereas like traditional theory, if we're looking at sociology and we're looking at, policy and creating policy, it's about taking what is real and trying to work with what's occurring with the facts on the ground, what we have. Critical social theory is about, you know, trying to engineer a society that we want. So it's like manipulating, it's choosing the facts or the data that we want that will contribute towards creating this society that we envision and that we want to engineer. It's like getting to the answer and then filling in the blank um, afterwards to have all the convenient, numbers and recipe for what we're hoping to have. And I think that's endemic of the left and the Democrats in a lot of ways. They're considered to be like idealists and
Mhm.
for social justice and altruists, but um, it's also often not pragmatic and it's not based in reality. And reality can be ugly and the truth can be inconvenient. But I remember Carol Hooven talking about this at that GenSpec conference a couple years ago. Like, she's like, we have to look at the truth because I firmly believe, and I agree with her. And she said something like this, like, the truth is actually what leads to positive social change. We need to work with the truth. And so, Jamie, I agree with you. Like, it's infuriating, but we need to work with the truth. It might take us longer to get where we need to be, and it might not, we might end up where we need to be, might not be where you wanted us to be,
Yeah.
but the truth is vital.
Well, now that you've crushed all of my Okay, well, I'm gonna not keep saying that the Democrats used to be about science and data.
But what I do want to say, I think, like after thinking about it, that I'm sure there's exceptions to that, of course. In a lot of ways, I do think Obama was pragmatic in some approaches to different things that he addressed and did. I think that he's secretly more of a realist than what people painted him to be and what he let himself on to be. Um, who knows? But it's sometimes I wonder. I mean, when we talk about, oh, the party of or party of this, I mean, is that just propaganda that we've been fed because the media has
Um,
been dominated by the left wing for so long that we grew up with this essentially? I mean, I'm 42, and so, coming up as a teenager in the 90s, I mean, come on. Like from then, especially from then on, it was this is what I'm being fed. I
okay,
mean,
this
even
makes it
go
so
ahead.
hard though. It makes it so hard to have any trust in any institution then of any kind. Because in order to read a single article, this single article here, you cannot give
Yeah.
them an inch of trust
Mhm.
Yeah.
because you give them an inch of trust and they write a sentence like the legal requirement in every state. And
Mhm.
the only reason why I know, like, I would I would go in the boxing ring with this man over that is not true is because I'm in these states so deep on this topic, but
Mhm.
I don't have the bandwidth to be so deep on every topic that I'm supposed to make judgments about as an educated citizen. So if I can't trust anything, then I should just move to the woods and become a green anarchist and have chickens and slaughter pigs, and that's all I should do with my life.
Lock up diabetics.
Damn it, Corey, we leave the diabetics out of it. Oh, they only did that because if they ate, their insulin would spike, and then so they would have to like feed them tiny amounts
We only locked them in the closet and starved them because if
because
they
we were
ate, they
saving
would
their lives.
die.
I think Jonathan Cowan should he should talk to any of us. But if he should talk to anybody, I think he should try to get some time to talk to you,
Hmm.
Jamie.
Because I just challenged him to go in the boxing ring, and I
That
have
would
no
be a
idea what
great
he looks
fundraiser
like.
for the LGBT Courage Coalition.
What
You
if
just got
he's like 6'8"? This is why men and women's sports it'll come down to this.
I,
no,
I,
it's boxing with facts.
I believe of him, just based on this writing, that there's the possibility that he has enough curiosity to try to figure out what he got wrong in that article and to test his intuitions against somebody who has good credentials coming from the left, maybe even the extreme left, is that's the term that he would use, and somebody who's found their way back from those extreme edges and has found a different perspective. I think if it's anybody, he should talk to you.
Or Lisa.
No, you.
No, okay. Be nice to Lisa. She's not here.
He's trying to
Or,
spare
or
Lisa a
Lisa.
conversation with this
Or Lisa.
like
Lisa.
Okay, so I personally need to wrap up soon because the reason why I have no makeup on today is because I have been in a lifeguard recertification class the last 3 days, and I have to go take my lifeguard test in the swimming pool shortly.
Nice.
Is
Can I
that
can I share a little anecdote before we wrap up?
Of course.
Unless
And then
someone
we
else
can
had
do
something
our
to.
no, and then we'll do our non-gender thing.
Well, I was away last week. I'm not going to give details because I definitely don't want to reveal it, but I was away. I was with a lot of gay men. I stay quiet about these things, just because I don't want to. It's whatever. Someone else brought it up. I realized that I was among other heretics, which is often the case, because people aren't stupid and crazy and they know the reality, Anyway, so we had this conversation. There were four of us in the conversation, and two of us, me and this other person, were very knowledgeable about that. He was kind of very into this. Now his partner is also passionate about kids not transitioning. He was very adamant about how anti-gay it is One of them was saying how it's fundamentally antithetical to gay liberation. We had this idea of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one of them in particular was like really in the rabbit hole. And he had said to me later, he's like, I'm so glad that we had that conversation in front of my partner because he kind of sometimes wonders like, why does this interest you so, like why are you so, and he's like, I don't know how else to say, but it's like this is a huge medical scandal and it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see um, people lose their minds over this stuff. And this guy's a really smart guy, world traveled, and he's just can't believe, like the rest of us, that he's seeing this ongoing. Now, the fourth person that was there is a very, very is I love this person, and he is um doesn't think males should compete in women's sports. He doesn't think that kids should medicalize. But what he kept bringing up and what was interesting, and I just want to share this because I'm like, this was just one example of something that was like this kind of fixation on. One gentleman who's really in the rabbit hole was talking about a transsexual, trans-identified male who had gotten bottom surgery and kind of admitted to him later, like, I didn't really want it. I got it because the guys that I was being approached with, like, wanted to prostitute me or like were creepy and weird. And then the other ones that I wanted to be with, like, they didn't want a chick with a dick. And so I was like, well, I guess there's just no place for me in this. So I'll just, do that, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, and it sucks. Like, I know that and of course, we all know how unsuccessful those surgeries can be.
Yeah.
And so, but he was like, this person really is, he was saying how historically this person would have been treated as like that minority, like a true transsexual, that tiny minority of people. And just because perhaps due to hormone exposure of the womb. He is super, super feminized. He can pass as a woman. In fact, my friend was surprised when he came out to him as trans because he passed so well for so long. He didn't know. So this is kind of one of those examples where it's like, oh, true trans, but it's also just like, well, they're male. It's just that they kind of appear as like what this typical woman. Anyway, other friend was really fixated on us believing what the trans person said about them to be true. So it was like, and I'm like, well, okay, so this person's male, it'd be great if we created more space for them in society, that there are as a minority of males and females that are really gender nonconforming, naturally and inherently, etc. So they don't think like, oh, this is the only option I have. I have to castrate myself, right? And he's like, but at least can you understand? Like, can you believe that what this person is saying, like they identify as female? Like, do you believe that that is their experience, that they identify, yes, they were born male, but they identify as female. And I'm like, they're not, but what is a female? What are you talking about? They're male. I'm just talking about the facts on the ground. I'm talking about the material reality of our human existence and our experience. And it was a very difficult conversation because it was like this. Where I kind of came to and where me and this other guy kind of came to was like, what you're kind of speaking propaganda. Like that, you've been propagandized with this word identifying as and born as and validating someone's subjective experience. Like this is these are all talking points that you've been fed for so long, that you have come to see it as like the only properly moral approach to this, and that's something that he just couldn't kind of let go over, is believing this person has
Yeah.
this experience. What do you guys think about that, if anything? Or was that just a boring anecdote? I don't know, but it was just
No,
something interesting.
I don't think it was boring. I also think it gives me a good sense of kind of like where's the community right now. And like, I find it really interesting how once the subject gets broached, like, I think part of the biggest part is just opening up the conversation to see where it goes. Um, but in that sense of that, can't you just believe the person? I think for me that becomes, well, you can believe whatever you want,
Yeah.
but we can't force anyone else to go along with somebody's belief structure. Like that's just okay. There are some people, I was about to say something mean about Mormons. I'm not going to do it. Uh, but not even mean. Anyway, do you know that he dug up like rocks and he put them in a hat? And he looked at these rocks and like that's where some of the Mormon scripture came from. Like people believe that. That's perfectly fine. Believe it all you want. Do not look in your hat now, Corey. But I mean, like,
Oh, there's God.
that's where it's like belief is like I can't tell you to stop believing in something. I mean, if Sarah believes that cottage core is the cutest like style ever, like go for it. But
Wait,
like
what is cottagecore? What is it?
It's like
It is-
dressing like a milkmaid.
Oh, got it.
Basically.
Okay, got it. Is it for trans women dressing like milkmaids or like just
No,
anybody?
it was-
For anybody.
No, it's really
Anybody.
it's really
Got it.
anybody who wants to dress like a milkmaid.
Got
I
it.
don't think it's just milkmaid.
Is it like tradwife kind of?
Yeah, there's some
Okay.
of that.
Yeah, I mean it's like, Sound of Music, dancing in a prairie.
Got it.
I,
Got it.
we could just have an episode where I just describe different style aesthetics if that's of interest.
Oh, sometimes you tweet out pictures and you're like, this is the most horrifying picture ever. And I'm like, oh shit, I like that one. Sometimes I agree, but then sometimes I'm like, no, I actually like this one.
Yeah.
I speak what you were saying before, Jamie, about like broaching the subject and having people free to talk about it. I kind of did. I didn't hold this guy's feet to the fire at all. But at one point I did say, because he's like, I just can't believe I know so many gay men don't feel this way. I know so many gay and lesbian people don't feel that. And I said, well, and I said, do you say it out loud? Do you say this to people?
Mhm.
He's like, I'm like, are you talking to, and he's like, honestly, no, I'm probably not. I'm probably not telling people how I feel about this. And I'm like, yeah, because it sucks and it's scary and horrible and it's not fun, but
Right.
that's why you can, when you say, I can't believe it because so many people feel this way, they're not talking. They're not saying anything. So you have to speak. I didn't want to be a dick, but I was like, speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well,
Non-gender
I
stuff,
think
right?
non-gender stuff. All right, who's ready to go?
I am actually, because I'll go
Okay.
get mine out of the way because you said Mormons. My guilty pleasure is The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives on Hulu. It is a brilliant, brilliant television. I'm grateful to God that it's on, that it exists. We're in season 2. It's about young Mormon housewives that like were in like a swinging scandal. They're part of like the mom talk thing on TikTok. A lot of drama, a lot of interesting storylines, craziness. They're very pretty too. It's
Mhm.
just it's fascinating. They all have like 2 or 3 kids at like 23 years old. It's really something. Highly recommend. Okay, go ahead. What else?
Okay. Who else is ready?
Corey.
Well, I don't have a lot, so I'm really digging into the bottom of the barrel. But I'll tell you, I have burned away way too many hours in the last couple of weeks playing a mobile game called Balatro.
How do you spell that?
Balatro.
What's that game like?
It's video poker. So it has some mechanics that are a little bit like video poker, but it's really in a category that they call roguelites, which means that each time that you play it, there's a progressive advancement system where you unlock a little bit more freedom or choice as you play the game. And there's a difficulty ramp that goes along with that. So spent too much time playing Balatro, but I know that other people will comment and talk about which games that have captured their attention as well. Please don't recommend any though, because I've already wasted enough time with Balatro.
I'll recommend. I started reading The Extinction of Experience: Being Human in a Disembodied World by Christine Rosen, and it's not technically gender related, but it's fairly related, and it's a big part of my own book. So it's a good thing.
Okay, I'm gonna go super hugely metaphysical, and I'm gonna recommend Parenthood.
Okay.
Too late.
I I know. I know. And I just read the New York Times article about Elon Musk and his like 14 children, and also apparently he does a lot of ketamine. What?
Hmm.
Seriously? Yeah. Okay. I just had a couple really proud parent moments this week. So I have a 16-year-old who drives terribly, but he's starting to take some ownership over his vehicle, and my 15-year-old tried 3 times and got his passed the permit test. Um, I just it's really neat to see them kind of become pseudo grown-ups.
Yeah.
And I just had the funniest parenting moment yesterday, and I burst out laughing, but then I also cried. I don't know why. But my oldest was flipping the laundry. He was doing the laundry on his own. He texted me and he said, "Hey mom, um, blah blah blah, their clothes are in the wash and to throw them in the dryer." And then he sent me this Instagram video because a Pokemon sticker had come off of someone's clothes and gotten stuck at the very back of the dryer. And my teenage children made these Instagram videos like, "Save the Pokemon. Why is the Pokemon in the dryer?" And it was just so endearing and cute. And like, I just thought it was super, it's just amusing. Like, so many things you have to learn to become a grown up. And watching them learn it and then just kind of back away and watch them screw things up. And yeah, it's really nice.
Have kids. Pronatalism. Jamie's pronatalism.
Pronatalism, but not ketamine. There's no pro-ketamine from my mouth.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Any final thoughts? No? Just say bye? All right.
Say bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.